Headquarters of the Militia, City of Jefferson, October 27, 1838. General John B. Clark. Sir, since the order of this morning to you, directing you to cause 400 mounted men to be raised within your division, I have received by Amos Reese, Esquire, of Ray County, and Wiley C. Williams, Esquire, one of my aides, information of the most appalling character, which entirely changes the face of things and places the Mormons in the attitude of an open and avowed defiance of the laws, and of having made war upon the people of this state. Your orders are, therefore, to hasten your operation with all possible speed. The Mormons must be treated as enemies, and must be exterminated or driven from the state if necessary for the public peace. Their outrages are beyond all description. If you can increase your force, you are authorized to do so to any extent you may consider necessary. I have just issued orders to Major General Willock of Marion County to raise 500 men and to march them to the northern part of Davies, and there unite with General Doniphan of Clay, who has been ordered with 500 men to proceed to the same point for the purpose of intercepting the retreat of the Mormons to the north. They have been redirected to communicate with you by express. You can also communicate with them if you find it necessary. Instead, therefore, of proceeding as at first directed to reinstate the citizens of Davies in their homes, you will proceed immediately to Richmond and then operate against the Mormons. Brigadier General Parks of Ray has been ordered to have 400 of his brigade in readiness to join you at Richmond. The whole force will be placed under your command. I am very respectfully your obedient servant, L.W. Boggs, Commander-in-Chief. What you just heard was the exact language of Missouri Executive Order 44, also referred to as the Mormon Extermination Order of 1838. Missouri Governor Lilburn Boggs issued this executive order in reaction to the events surrounding the Battle of Crooked River. That confrontation occurred after a state militia from Ray County captured several Mormon individuals from Caldwell County. In response, a group of Mormons attempted to rescue those taken, which escalated the situation and led to the battle. Governor Boggs' order was a direct result of this violent encounter, marking a significant moment in the conflict between the state militia, the Mormon community, and bloodshed on the American frontier. This is the inside story of Missouri Executive Order 44 and the cold-blooded extermination of the Mormons in the Old West. In the early 1830s, a significant number of members from the newly formed Church of Christ, later known as the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or LDS, began moving into Jackson County, Missouri. These Mormons believed the area, particularly Independence, Missouri, was divinely destined to become a religious city called Zion. Consequently, they were directed to purchase large amounts of land. However, this goal created friction with the non-Mormon settlers in the area, as their cultural, religious, and political differences, combined with their opposition to slavery and efforts to proselytize among Native Americans and African Americans, only deepened the tension. By 1833, tensions had escalated to violence. Local mobs destroyed Mormon properties, including their printing press and storehouse, eventually forcing the expulsion of the Mormons from Jackson County. These violent actions set a pattern of hostility that would characterize the relationship between Mormons and Missouri residents for years. Many Mormons fled to neighboring counties, especially Clay County, seeking refuge. In 1836, after failed attempts to reclaim their land, the Missouri legislature, recognizing the need for a more permanent solution, created a new county called Caldwell County. This was specifically designated for Mormon settlement. The Mormons then established Far West, their new headquarters. For a time, the arrangement seemed to bring peace, with leaders and settlers reporting harmonious relations with their non-Mormon neighbors. However, By 1838, the peace had eroded due to internal church struggles and external pressures. Economic and leadership disputes within the church, especially related to financial mismanagement, led to the excommunication of prominent leaders. In addition, the church's rapid expansion into neighboring counties, particularly Daviess and Carroll counties, alarmed local settlers who saw it as a violation of the original compromise to limit Mormon settlements to Caldwell County. This resulted in increased resentment from non-Mormons who felt threatened politically and economically. The Mormons, faced with internal dissent and external threats, saw the rise of a controversial group called the Danites. This vigilante organization was dedicated to defending the church's interests, often through aggressive tactics. The formation was partly fueled by fiery sermons like Sidney Rigdon's Salt Sermon, which called for the removal of dissenters from the church. Tensions boiled over during the 1838 election in Gallatin, Missouri, when non-Mormon settlers attempted to block Mormons from voting, leading to a violent skirmish. Although casualties were rumored, none were confirmed. Following the conflict, both Mormon and non-Mormon leaders tried to negotiate peace once again, but distrust and aggression persisted. Soon after, Mormons were expelled from the town of DeWitt in Carroll County. Despite their efforts to resist, they were eventually forced to leave after being besieged by armed locals. As Mormons moved to Daviess County, they retaliated by plundering and burning non-Mormon settlements. These actions, combined with the general unrest, sparked widespread outrage amongst the local Missourians. Ultimately, both sides engaged in acts of violence and property destruction, further deepening the divide. Mormons, expelled from several towns, faced extreme hardships as winter approached, and non-Mormon settlers, displaced by Mormon raids, experienced similar suffering. Despite efforts by some leaders to de-escalate the situation, the conflict continued to spiral out of control, setting the stage for further clashes in what became known as the Mormon War of 1838. In the autumn of that same year, growing hostilities between Mormon settlers and other Missouri residents reached a critical point. The situation intensified when General David R. Atchison, who led the state militia in northwest Missouri, instructed Captain Samuel Bogart to monitor Buncombe Strip. While their primary objective was to prevent armed groups from entering Ray County, Bogart and his team overstepped their authority. Known for his lack of tact, Bogart had previously aided anti-Mormon groups in Carroll County. He and his men began targeting Mormon inhabitants in Buncombe Strip and Caldwell County, confiscating their weapons and demanding they evacuate the region. During one such operation, Bogart's group apprehended 3 Mormon individuals. Word of their capture swiftly reached far west Missouri. Fearing for the captives' lives, Mormon leadership assembled an armed group to free them. This rescue party was led by David W. Patton, nicknamed Captain Fear Not, due to his bravery in early confrontations in Daviess County. As October 24, 1838 drew to a close, Bogart's forces set up camp near Crooked River. Meanwhile, Patton's rescue team advanced from the far west. At dawn, on October 25th, the two groups collided. The conflict ignited when one of Bogart's guards shot Patrick O'Banion, a Mormon scout, who later succumbed to his injuries. Despite holding a tactical advantage behind the riverbank, the Ray County militia was eventually forced to retreat when Patton initiated a charge, rallying his troops with the cry, "God and Liberty." Caught off guard by this aggressive maneuver, the Missourians hastily fled across the river. The assault proved costly for both sides. Patton suffered a fatal wound, and 2 other Mormons, including Gideon Carter, perished in the fight. The militia suffered 1 fatality, while another member, Samuel Tarwater, was gravely injured and disfigured after losing consciousness. Stories of the Mormon militia's alleged brutality during the encounter spread rapidly, further inflaming the ongoing dispute. This brief but violent clash, which claimed 4 lives total, marked a pivotal moment in the Mormon War. Inflated accounts of the battle some falsely stating that Bogart's forces suffered 50% casualties, soon reached Missouri Governor Lilburn Boggs. Interpreting the Mormon actions as outright rebellion, Boggs promptly issued his Executive Order 44, mobilizing 2,500 state militia members to quell the unrest. 2 days later, he declared that the Mormons must be treated as enemies and mandated their elimination or forced removal from Missouri. In the aftermath of the Mormon capitulation in November 1838, General Clark invoked Governor Lilburn Boggs' Executive Order 44. He cautioned that armed resistance would have led to inevitable bloodshed. Clark emphasized the governor's mandate for the complete exodus of Mormons from Missouri, warning that defiance would have resulted in the destruction of their dwellings and potential harm to their loved ones. The general adopted a stern tone, advising the Mormons against expecting clemency and asserting that their leadership would remain in custody. He strongly discouraged any plans to linger in Missouri beyond the immediate term or to cultivate crops, as such actions would likely incite further animosity from local residents. Clark left no ambiguity about his intentions. Any violation of the agreement would prompt his return, at which point he would fully execute the expulsion order without restraint. He underscored the finality of the Mormon leaders' fate, ruling out any possibility of their release. Despite the use of the term extermination in the governor's decree, Boggs later claimed his primary objective was to facilitate Mormon removal without bloodshed. Scholars Alexander L. Baugh and Stephen LeSueur have noted that during this historical period, the term exterminate often carried the connotation of forced relocation rather than mass slaughter. A persistent topic of historical debate revolves around whether any direct fatalities resulted from the Extermination Order between its proclamation on October 27th and the Mormon surrender on November 1st, 1838. The consensus among most historians is that there is no concrete evidence suggesting the militia used the order to justify killings during this brief window. However, the decree did precipitate a mass migration of approximately 15,000 Mormons to Illinois, subjecting them to a grueling journey fraught with severe winter hardships. On the afternoon of October 30th, 1838, a devastating event occurred at Hawn's Mill, a settlement situated along Shoal Creek in Caldwell County, Missouri. This tragedy, which unfolded mere days after Missouri Governor Lilburn Boggs issued his contentious directive, would become one of the most harrowing incidents in the Mormon conflict, while also making it hard to believe the aforementioned argument that no one died as a direct result of Order 44. Jacob Hawn had established the mill around 1835 to 1836, and although not a Mormon himself, his enterprise had attracted a community of about 75 Mormon families by late 1838. The area had become a flashpoint of growing animosity between Mormon settlers and local Missourians. A group of 240 men, led by Colonel Thomas Jennings and other local leaders, formed an unofficial militia. This force included notable figures such as Major Daniel Ashby, a member of the Missouri legislature. While it remains unclear whether these militiamen were aware of Governor Boggs' recent order, their assault on Hawn's Mill seemed to stem from long-simmering anti-Mormon sentiment rather than a direct response to the governor's decree. Nevertheless, the raid commenced without warning that autumn afternoon. Despite previous attempts at peaceful negotiation, the militia launched a sudden attack on the settlement. As the assault began, most women and children sought safety in nearby woodlands, while the men attempted to fortify themselves inside the local blacksmith shop. Unfortunately, the building's construction, featuring widely spaced logs, offered little protection against the onslaught. In a brutal display of force, the militia unleashed approximately 1,600 rounds into the structure, rapidly transforming it into a deadly trap. Within moments, several Mormon men lost their lives. Among the victims was Thomas McBride, an elderly individual who was shot after surrendering and then subjected to horrific mutilation. The assault's brutality escalated, with even children becoming targets. A group of young boys, including Sardius Smith and Charles Merrick, sought refuge beneath the blacksmith's bellows, only to be discovered by the attackers. In a chilling act, one militiaman executed young Smith, invoking the notorious rationalization, "Nits will make lice," implying that even Mormon youths posed a future threat. Charles Merrick later died from wounds sustained during the attack. The final toll was devastating. 17 Mormons lost their lives, with an additional 15 suffering injuries. In stark contrast, the assailants emerged relatively unscathed, reporting only a handful of minor casualties. In the wake of this carnage, surviving Mormons faced further atrocities. Bodies were desecrated, homes ransacked, and families left in utter destitution. The victims were hastily interred in a makeshift grave, nothing more than a shallow well. For those who lived through this ordeal, the event became a grim emblem of the extreme hostility they encountered in Missouri. The repercussions of this tragedy, coupled with ongoing persecution, compelled the majority of the Mormon population to abandon Missouri by early 1839, with many seeking refuge in Illinois. Notably, Joseph Smith, the founder of the Latter-day Saint movement, had previously counseled the Hawn's Mill settlers to relocate to the larger Mormon stronghold of Far West. In retrospect, full adherence to this advice might have averted numerous casualties. Subsequently, Mormons sought compensation for their losses, both at Hawn's Mill and elsewhere in Missouri. However, these efforts proved fruitless, with no reparations ever granted. This massacre remains a somber chapter in Mormon church history, underscoring the intense hardships endured by the community during their time in Missouri. Efforts to rectify the cold-blooded massacre wouldn't reappear for almost 150 years, but in the closing months of 1975, a significant gesture of reconciliation was initiated by Lyman F. Edwards, who led the Far West stake of the reorganized Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Edwards reached out to Missouri's Governor Kit Bond, proposing his participation in the upcoming annual stake conference scheduled for June 25, 1976. This invitation was extended as a symbolic act of harmony, coinciding with the United States' bicentennial celebrations. The conference, held nearly 14 decades after the controversial original decree, became a platform for a historic moment. Governor Bond took center stage to address the assembled congregation. In his speech, he drew attention to the unconstitutional aspects of the infamous edict issued by Governor Boggs so many years ago. This acknowledgement set the stage for a pivotal announcement. Governor Bond unveiled a new executive order, which read as follows. Whereas on October 27, 1838, the governor of the state of Missouri, Lilburn W. Boggs, signed an order calling for the extermination or expulsion of Mormons from the state of Missouri, and whereas Governor Boggs' order clearly contravened the rights to life, liberty, property, and religious freedom as guaranteed by the Constitution of the United States, as well as the Constitution of the state of Missouri, and whereas in this bicentennial year, as we reflect on our nation's heritage, the exercise of religious freedom is without question one of the basic tenets of our free democratic republic. Now, therefore, I, Christopher S. Bond, Governor of the state of Missouri, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Constitution and the laws of the state of Missouri, do hereby order as follows. Expressing on behalf of all Missourians our deep regret for the injustice and undue suffering which was caused by the 1838 order, I hereby rescind Executive Order No. 44, dated October 27, 1838, issued by Governor Lilburn W. Boggs. In witness, I have hereunto set my hand and caused to be affixed the Great Seal of the State of Missouri in the city of Jefferson on this 25th day of June, 1976. Signed, Christopher S. Bond, Governor. May this black mark on the Old West lore never be forgotten.